We're here to present Disneyland.
Disneyland Park Paris is the first tourist destination in Europe. The park has welcomed more than 320 visitors since the opening. However, despite this apparent success, Disneyland Paris is facing financial difficulties and a drop in the number of visitors. Faced with this significant drop in income and profitability, we want to understand the causes of this recurring profitability problems. How could managers find a new approach to turn Disneyland Paris into a profitable business? As we do not know the causes of the failing profitability, we have decided that research must be done on both revenues and costs. Thus, our study aimed to answer the following question. While taking into account both areas of profitability, revenues, and costs, what should Disney managers do to turn the company profitable? From there, we have deduced some things that could be the causes of the bad financial health of Disneyland Paris. We thought about looking into customers' retention. How often do customers come back? If they do, if not, why?
So hello everyone. As Romance just presented the introduction to the problem that Disneyland Paris is facing, we're going to go a bit deeper in the problem, and we have seen that Disneyland has tried to be refinanced by the big corporation Walt Disney, and that the refinancing solutions didn't work. So this is a problem of recurring profitability. The company doesn't manage to be profitable even though they are transforming the way the company is working. So we have come up with the following problem. Managers have to find a new approach on how to turn Disneyland Paris into a profitable business. The only problem is that since we have no additional information on their profitability problem, so does it come from costs or does it come from revenues? A profitability problem can come from both of them or only one of these elements. If, however, the costs are too big to outbalance the revenues, we could increase revenues, but they wouldn't be outbalanced and the company would still not be profitable. Hence, this is why our research question is the following. While taking into account both areas of profitability, so revenues and costs, what should Disneyland managers do to turn the company into a profitable one? Can you please move a slide? Thank you. So as you can see, we've split our specific research questions into two areas. The area related to revenues and the area related to costs. So let's go through them. What are the company's different revenue streams? So this is to find out from what does Disneyland get income? What are the different types of activities that Disneyland Paris is promoting and getting money from? How sensitive are the customers to changes in price? So this takes into account the other element of revenues. Revenues can be broken down into number of visitors and price paid per visitor. So we wanted to also look into what could we do to prices? Can we change prices? Are prices flexible, or are our customers not going to pay more if the prices increase? How can we attract new customers? So again, this is assuming that the price is high enough, but the number of visitors isn't. How many customers do we have and how often do they come back? This is related to the retention of customers Romance has been talking about earlier. Which actions have the strongest impact on visiting frequency? Again, related to the retention. How can we make them come back? Which actions have the strongest impact on customer loyalty and customer retention? How can we make the gift shop more attractive, which is one of the revenue streams? How can we send the image of a safe place to go? This last question is related to safety practices because we assumed that the last heartbreaking terrorism events in Europe might have an impact on Disneyland's profitability and on its number of customers. So moving on to the cost side, we wanted to know which are the fixed costs and variable costs incurred by Disneyland Paris to find out if maybe it's a problem related to too high fixed costs or too high variable costs. Historically, how did these costs change? Of course, analyzing a cost as it is without putting it in time and without following its trends doesn't say anything. How are these costs compared to Orlando's and Tokyo's Disneyland? This is a benchmark approach. We want to analyze how these two other parks, which are from the same business and from the same universe, do to be profitable, and maybe we could apply it to Disney. What are the costs of the debt refinance? This is in order to find out why did the refinancing solutions not work for Disneyland Paris. And finally, how much of these costs are associated with revenue generation versus upkeep to find the synergies between the revenues and the costs. Thank you.
Hello there, I'm going to begin with the qualitative analysis. Now, when doing the qualitative analysis, there are two main sampling methods that can be used to determine what kind of approach you're going to take. Now, these are broadly categorized into probability or non-probability. Probability is based around taking a random sample of a particular group of people, while non-probability is picking individuals based on them meeting some sort of criteria. Now, because we were looking to find out specific information about how the park could be improved, it was fairly necessary for us to be picking people that had actually been to Disneyland. Because we're 5 IESEG students who don't have a lot of time or a lot of resources, this meant that we had a fairly limited pool of people from which to pick from. This meant that convenient sampling was the best idea for us, and this meant that we were just simply picking people based on them meeting the criteria and then being easily at hand. Once we'd selected what type of sampling method we were going to use, we had to decide whether or not we were going to use an interview or a focus group. While focus groups certainly have their benefits, as do interviews, the same principle that applied to sampling, and that we're 5 ESEG students and we didn't have a lot of resources, meant that interviewing made the most sense. Now, while having a focus group might have been able to come up with some better ideas and some better answers to our specific research questions, we certainly didn't have the resources to get a bunch of people in a room for an hour that had all been to Disneyland. And so we settled for doing the interview. We conducted that on 4 people, as can be seen. We then did a vertical analysis of that to figure out what common trends we could pick, and specifically for a code. Now, while gender or buyer and not buyer aren't particularly interesting in this case, what might have been interesting, and certainly was categorizing people based on whether or not they were French or they were touring from another country and visiting Disneyland. Once we'd done that, we did a horizontal analysis to figure out what sorts of views, opinions, and trends we could see across the codes. And then that was distilled down to see if we could answer any of our specific research questions.
Okay, so now we moved on the quantitative methods. So just Sebastian told you about the qualitative, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the quantitative methods. So we used a sample design that was a covariance sample. So it's a non-probability one, and our sample size was almost was around 103. And so what I wanted to show you on this graph is that most people answer that they have a moderately enjoy of Disneyland, and some also did have a very high enjoyment. So that's the most important part, even if just 2 people answer that they didn't enjoy Disneyland. So now we will try to answer how specific research questions. So one of the specific research questions was, how can we attract new customers? So to answer that, we found that actually security was really an important matter for customers, and that while we were running tests, some things showed us that it was really relevant to increase security and to really maybe not increase but show that there was security and guard for the parks. And one of the other specific research questions was, how can we make the gift store more attractive? And in our interview, we have seen that it was very important for parents that the price decreases because prices are very important, and maybe children will do like some prices to get gifts, to get some presents from the gift store, but it's really a problem for parents, and they don't really like gift stores, and they have like crisis with their children, so they can afford it. So I think they could launch new products cheaper. Thank you.
So the next research question we will talk about is about customer loyalty. Which action have the strongest impact on customer loyalty? First of all, with the ANOVA test, we found out that going to the restaurant at Disneyland leads to significantly higher enjoyment, so it has a positive impact on customer loyalty. And And then, of course, the attractions are very important, an important part for customer loyalty, because new attractions, especially the ones that come from the newest Disney movies, are highly appreciated, and this can attract new customers as well as making customers coming back to Disneyland.
Just before we finish up with the limitations of what we've done, we're actually going to present some recommendations that we can potentially be giving. Now, the first one is that the characters being dressed up was a major contributor to what was considered entertaining. At least that's what we can tell from the trends. So we're going to assume that they should definitely keep that going. This was something that we can see them expanding upon, specifically with the new franchises that they've purchased, such as Star Wars. The second one was that the gift store was generally received as negative, but people bought from it anyway. So we can sort of assume that they don't necessarily have to change the model if it's already making money. However, if they could realistically reduce the costs or increase the quality of the products, they could potentially boost sales. The next one is that the transport could be improved. That was a trend we saw with people not particularly enjoying it. This could actually be an option for an improved revenue stream if they could actually monetize it. I'm not specifically sure how they would do that, but if they could, add a charge to it but make it somewhat more reliable, they could turn that into something that makes money. The last recommendation has to do with smoking and what our qualitative analysis showed between people that are not from France and those who are. People who are not from France and generally aren't European didn't particularly enjoy smoking in the park. However, those types of people, those people that are touring from other countries, didn't actually tend to make return trips, and they'd already bought the ticket. So it's quite possible that that actually wouldn't have a monetary impact or improve or reduce ticket sales. So we wouldn't recommend at this point, with the amount of research that we've done, that they actually do anything about that. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we have seen what impacts the customers to go or not to go to Disneyland, and which of the revenue streams have the most important impact on customer retention, let's look a bit at the limitations of our study and why our study is not accurate enough to come up with real recommendations that we could introduce to Disneyland Paris's management. So first of all, the first limitation is related to our first assumption. As we had no insight from managers and from people from the inside of Disneyland, we could not analyze the cost side of our specific research questions, who remained unanswered. We assumed that the problem comes from revenues. And if this is wrong, as you can see over here, if the expenses part is too big to outbalance the revenue side, the net profit will never be positive. So this is the first assumption and the first limitation. The second limitation is that by interviewing customers and people who come to Disneyland, we assume that the problem can be solved by a marketing campaign or some marketing tools. However, this might purely be a managerial problem in Disneyland's board of directors who cannot work correctly and profitably together, and so any marketing campaign would not have an impact. Last, we have used a sample size that might not be representative for our whole population. We had 110 answers approximately, and the population going to Disneyland every day is much higher than this, of course, and this sample size might not be representative enough to come up with conclusions over the whole population of Disney tourists.